Lizzie, do you want to do the intro for the podcast?
Yes. It is, hi, welcome to Basic Folk with Cindy Howes and Lizzie No. We have honest conversations with folk musicians.
Nailed it.
Okay.
Good work.
I got very nervous, but it turns out I had the power all along.
So Lizzie, how are you doing? You're playing shows again.
Yes. For those who can't see on video, I have a wild look in my eye because I'm busy for the first time in 2 years.
I'm seeing like all these musicians posting about their tour dates. It's got to be so hard to make that transition.
It's very hard. It's very good. And that's what's so strange about it. I'm finding myself really needing to journal more because the feelings are complex. This is what I've been working towards. This is what I've been waiting for. This is what I want to do with my life. And finally, I get to do it after a very unfortunate pause. But then you're sort of like mired in details about rental cars and hotels and rehearsal schedules and who's bringing what gear. And you're just like inundated with a bunch of stuff.
I was hanging out with Issa Burke from Lula Wiles the other night.
The greatest. I'm such a big fan.
She was like, my touring muscles have completely atrophied. Mm-hmm. Except that she said there's one thing that remains and that she is able to pack like very, very efficiently and on a dime, it sounds like.
I feel like I'm the same way. Like I can pack a suitcase or a car trunk or a mini fridge like to the maximum capacity. People are asking me like, okay, what time are we getting to X location? And I'm finding myself feeling like offended. Like, why should I know what time we're getting?
Right.
Oh, actually, it is my job to know.
So you have some tour dates posted now.
Yes.
I see that you're actually coming pretty close to Pittsburgh. You're going to be, in August, you'll be in Bethlehem, PA, which is not close to Pittsburgh.
Yes, for Music Fest.
What is that?
Music Fest is a really great festival that I've known about for a while, and I'm excited to finally play. I think the Preservation Hall Jazz Band is headlining the day I'm there.
I'm going to try to come out to your Cleveland show because that's like an hour and a half from Pittsburgh.
Oh my gosh, that would be great.
Okay, so before we get into our interview for today, it's Lizzie's second Basic Folk interview with Kishi Bashi. Pretty pumped for that.
Kishi Bashi.
I wanted to ask you some questions about being on the road.
Okay.
I just took a really long drive from my parents' house in Walpole, Massachusetts to Pittsburgh. It was 9 hours long.
Woof.
And I was really excited because I found that function in Spotify where you can queue things up, you know, and I just queued up like 20 podcasts.
I have only just discovered the queue function this past week.
Right? It's life-changing.
No one told me.
The other thing that I've just discovered actually was that there's a button on my steering wheel that is sort of like if you're listening to a CD, you can like hit the button and it skips to the next track. But that also translates to podcasts where you can like fast forward.
Cindy, you're living in the future.
I know. Listen, okay, so it's not just questions about being on the road. It's tips because I am a road dog, clearly.
Yes.
So Lizzie, what do you listen to when you're on the road?
That is a great question. It's always evolving, of course, but I like to keep a steady diet of music I'm really comfortable with, music I don't know, and podcasts. So like late at night, if I'm trying to stay awake, I need to hear someone talking. I can't listen to music. I have to like be hearing something narrative. So I usually listen to Last Podcast on the Left or My Brother and Me. Last Podcast on the Left is all about like serial killers and cults. And My Brother and Me is just three delightful brothers who are comedians who are from West Virginia, and they give advice. So those are my favorite podcasts. Also Stradio Lab. I don't know if you know Stradio Lab. It's two comedians analyzing straight culture, which is so funny. Shout out to my friend George Severus for that. So then I like to listen to like what I consider great road trip music, which is like Gillian Welch, Lyle Lovett, The War on Drugs.
How many times do you listen to that Tom Cochrane song, Life is a Highway?
I do not listen to Life is a Highway, but you know what always comes up is eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking. Like you have to listen to that on every tour. And then I'll try to I'll make sure anyone who I'm touring with gets to DJ a little bit because I want to learn more about music that I wouldn't naturally listen to.
I also am curious about, like, so during the pandemic, I moved in with my girlfriend and
Congratulations.
I was like, thank you. And I was like, I don't want to watch TV every night. So what are some games that we can play? So I was like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull out some old favorites. And I bought a bunch of games. And the one that has remained is a game called Skippo. Have you heard of this game?
What is Skippo?
It's made by the creators of Uno. So it's like Uno's lesser known distant relative.
You have my attention.
It's a simple concept of like counting cards. It's like less complicated than Uno. Elizabeth and I have bought Skippo like 5 times during the pandemic because we'll like bring it to a place and then we just end up like giving it to somebody because they're like, this is so fun.
Wait,
it's very
I need to
simple.
get this.
You can get it at like a Target.
I'm going to keep an eye out because maybe my next trip to Walmart or Target, I'll have to get Skippo. Normally, in the car, I just like interview everyone.
Oh, that's cool.
And I feel like there's a strange automatic buy-in when you're in a long car ride. Like normally it wouldn't be appropriate to like ask people what is their deepest fear or what do they want to be done with their corpse when they die or like what are their favorite memories from the past 24 hours. But like if you're in a long car ride, you can be like, what's the best thing that happened today? Like, would you rather be alone or surrounded by a crowd of people? You know, like you can just really get deep with people.
Gives you a chance to be like really creative and also really creepy. Oh, I want to tell you, if you like serial killers, I think you're going to really like this book. It's called Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't know if you've actually heard of this or read this before.
I have not seen this.
So this is the book that they're making into a Martin Scorsese movie, and like Leonardo DiCaprio is going to be in it, and Jason Isbell and Sturgill Simpson are going to be in it as well. So this is like a crazy book. It says in the 1920s, the richest people per capita in the world, the whole world, were members of the Osage Nation in Oklahoma. That's because like the United States like pushed them onto this reservation. They're like, here, have this crappy land. And it turned out there was so much oil under it. But then they started getting murdered.
Oh, God.
It was like a pretty bad situation down there. So like this book is about that. It's about oppressions that the United States put upon First Nations people in like like the late 1800s to the early 1900s to now, and sort of like explaining like basically how the U.S. like broke down tribes and what are those terrible schools called?
Oh, the boarding schools.
Yeah, they would like take the children away and sort of like Anglify them.
Right.
And this
Cut
book
their
covers
hair
that
and stuff. Yeah.
And then it's also about the birth of the FBI. So
whoa,
and it's really well written. This guy David Gran.
Okay, I'm gonna need to get my copy of that. Do you have any podcast recommendations for while I'm out and about driving 13 hours into Illinois?
So we just recently did this promo swap with this awesome like old time jam podcast called Get Up in the Cool, which I totally would recommend because Cameron DeWitt is the host and he's like turned the jam and the hang at the jam into a podcast. And it's really cool because these musicians are playing like traditional songs that they've learned from tradition bearers. And they're talking about those songs and, you know, it's pretty fun. So I'd recommend that one. And then my favorite podcast by far is this podcast, which if you haven't listened to it, you're in for a treat. It's called You're Wrong About.
Oh my gosh, I listened to the Courtney Love episode. That was so riveting. I need to get back into that podcast.
Yeah, they did recently, like within the last year, they did like a 5-part Princess Diana episode and it's bonkers.
Okay, I'm going to listen to that on my drive.
Okay, let's get into our podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so we're going to be talking, or Lizzie's going to be talking to Kishi Bashi today. Do you want to set us up for this?
Sure. So Kaoru Ishibashi, who is known as Kishi Bashi, is a violinist, guitarist, multi-instrumentalist, singer, and songwriter from Washington State and Virginia. He got a really interesting start in music because he went to Cornell to study engineering, ended up flunking out and kind of realizing his true path in music. He went to Berklee College of Music and studied film scoring, started playing in bands, moved to New York. The rest is history. So he has this incredible ability to be fluent in rock and pop and experimental styles that is really just refreshing and uplifting. And all of his music is so energetic, sort of hypnotic, really like brings you into his loving arms in a way. I don't know if that's too cheesy to say. When you talk to him, you just realize that he's a person who is incredibly creative and critical, but also super hopeful. And a lot of his work deals with how we can, in a very practical sense, bring empathy into our daily lives. So it was just so cool to talk with him, not only about his outlook on life, but about music and family and road trips and traveling. And something I was really excited to dig into with him was his recent film and music project about the internment camps that the United States government subjected Japanese Americans to during World War II, because he's done a ton of research on that, kind of at the locations of the camps, and has created a documentary and a bunch of music around that. And it's breathtaking, the work.
Also, Kay is like the nicest person ever.
He's a ray of sunshine.
Totally a ray of sunshine. Okay, we're going to take a listen to a song from Kay before we get to the interview between Lizzie and Kay. This is from his latest EP. The song is Wait for Springtime, and then we'll get to our conversation with Kishi Bashi on Basic Folk.
Magic of the season was second to no one. When we came together in springtime, the summer came too fast. And the acre of our hill was suddenly big and small. 'Twas empty in the winter. I'll just wait for springtime. And I wanted you so savage, as a gentleman admired, the most famous of sinners. We were silenced all but one. I was reaching for the stars, but the rockets very well. Well, the view on earth is magic. I'll just wait for springtime.
Welcome to Basic Folk. I am Lizzie No, and I am so happy to be talking with the phenomenal songwriter, violinist, multi-instrumentalist, and performer Kishi Bashi. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I want to start by talking about nature in your music. All of your music across albums strikes me as really romantic with a capital R, like
capital R.
Full of feeling.
Okay.
And
yeah,
like that connection to nature. Is a connection to the outdoors something that you've always felt deeply, or is that something that's developed as you've traveled as a musician?
Well, first of all, I like to think of my romantic with a more italicized R, you know.
Okay.
No, actually, you know, nature came to me like later in life. Honestly, I was like a city dweller. I lived in New York City. You know, I was kind of like a man of industry, you know, and technology and stuff like that. And then
yes,
I think recently I just had like a lot of opportunities to come out to Montana. You know, the mountains. I don't know if your viewers cannot see this this felt mountain behind me, but
it's felt. I thought it was a neat mural.
Yeah, no, it's like the LT's like you can get it online, but I think like I started realizing that, you know, the power of nature it has on people. You know, it's like this when you go to like an ocean or a mountain that's so vast, it makes you feel really small, and it gives you like this kind of sense of like a humbling feeling. And I think I really tapped into that,
Right.
like, later in life, because I used to just be excited about.
Is that a feeling that you feel when you're snowboarding too? I've heard that you're a big snowboarder.
I love snowboarding. Yeah, I mean, that's just adrenaline,
Yeah.
But being up on top of a mountain, like ready, and just like taking the sights in. I just think that like, city dwellers, just like sometimes you just lose touch and you wonder why you're so frustrated or so disconnected, and I think you just need that grounding. That's why you need parks and open spaces and things like that in your life.
Yeah, I think we're built for that as a species. Okay, back to music. So you began your musical education at the Suzuki School, which is, I learned Suzuki violin as a 3-year-old.
Oh, yeah. No way.
And for any listeners who might not be familiar with Suzuki, it's a method of learning instruments that emphasizes ear training and memorization, and I'm sure you could fill in the blanks on that. So what I'm curious about is how much of that particular type of technique stays with you to this day, and how did you, in a technical sense, start to transition into jazz and rock? Like, was it challenging to kind of transform the Suzuki technique into all different styles?
Yeah, so Suzuki technique is like really kind of made for early learning, I think. And like it's the one thing that I really, really value from it is the ear training. So just learning by ear is something that has been done traditionally, like forever, by any musician. It's only until like the sophisticated classical music came around that you have to like read everything.
Right.
And it's like when you learn something by ear, you really internalize it. It becomes like a part of you. And that's something I always appreciated. So like when I'm trying to learn new things, I try and like listen first. Complicated classical music, it's just sometimes you just have to like read it because it's just too complicated, But even like with jazz, connecting, like I got into jazz violin and like swing fiddle and stuff like that. And that's, you could read a solo, or you could read stuff, but it's really better to just learn it by ear.
Right,
and
learn
then
the
you
feel.
Can learn the feel, and then eventually that'll just like, it'll become like this thing that comes out of you, like part of your language. So
yeah, in a way, reading music is super important, but it can also, especially when you're young, be like another layer of barrier between you and like the actual playing.
Yeah, and it's just about internalizing the music, and I think there's a lot of criticism from like the classical music, the established institution that that they don't read very well, like Suzuki players, But I can just say, who cares? It's like if you're having fun with the music, that's pretty much what matters,
Yeah, and in a way, there's sort of a folk ethos to listening and being able to memorize things rather than reading them. And what does good fiddle sound mean to you now?
Fiddle sound, good fiddle sound. Well, I mean, I guess they always ask me like, what's the difference between fiddle and violin? It's just basically you're like more drunk when you play fiddle. It's the same instrument. But I don't know. There's so many amazing violinists out there,
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm really a pretty mediocre violinist. I do things differently with my violin, but I don't keep it up. I don't play every day. I don't wake up and like, man, I just want to like play something. That's not me.
Do you think of yourself more as like an artist writ large than like specifically an instrumentalist? Like if a stranger was like, what are you? What do you do? What would you say first?
I would say musician, the broad category, and then like, well, what do you mean? And then I'm like, well, I'm a songwriter, but I also play violin because that's one of my strong points. I play, that's like that was my bread and butter for like 10 years when I lived in New York, so it's like, so I treat it as like a craft. But then like, but I do enjoy it. I don't know sometimes. Yeah. But it's like back then when I was grinding, I would practice every day, a lot. But now I don't. I'm more of a conceptual artist. I produce and I like write, work on my songs.
I'm always so jealous of people. I mean, you always want to be what you're not, because I'm always so envious of artists that have the like discipline to just play and play for hours a day. And I don't have it. I could write every day. I don't think I could. I can't play all the time. So that definitely resonates with me.
Like, I'm also not the guy who's just always like singing in my room, some people just like, they love to just like pick up their guitar and just like sing all the time. Yeah. And for me, it's not exactly, I'd rather just like chill, and like read or something or answer emails. I don't know.
You have to be taking in inputs rather than just always like playing and
I'm basically
and putting
like,
out.
I'm basically like lazy until I really have to do something,
That's a humble way to put it.
But I also feel like being happy is like a really good productive state to be in, content and not stressed out, So.
Yeah, if it starts to feel really burdensome, that's not going to be productive.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. But when did you start singing in front of audiences? Like, you started out as a violinist, but when did you kind of make that connection? Like, I can sing and play.
I was in like a folk band in college before I went to jazz school. And then, so I started singing then. And then, but then I got really into jazz. And then like,
were you singing jazz at all? Or was it like, it's always been folk singing?
I don't think I ever pursued that jazz singing thing. But, I do it at gigs. Like if I had a restaurant gig and I had to sing something, sure. Like I could sing like Dinah or whatever, but
wow. Would love to see.
Yeah. Dana, da, 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 whatever. I don't even know the words. I suck at lyrics. So that's another thing you need to know about me is like, I can't memorize anything.
So you're not good at playing violin. You're not great with lyrics.
I'm lazy. I'm a procrastinator. Everything.
Oh, I want to talk about those college days, because I've read in interviews with you that you didn't even think of a career in music as something that you saw for yourself, and you were studying engineering before you ended up going to Berklee College of Music. So when did the light switch turn on that making a living in music was even possible? When did that start to feel real?
Well, like as an Asian guy, like growing up, you're like being an artist is not even an option, at least in that era. You're an engineer. You do something that's like that gives you a tangible, vocation, like being a lawyer, something technical, that gets you a job. So, but I had been around orchestras. Like there's the Virginia Symphony where I grew up. But I interacted with like members of them. But I never really saw that I never thought I was like that good as a violinist.
But that's such a particular competitive avenue when it comes to like the orchestra auditioning and how the level that you have to be at. Yeah,
but in the 80s, 90s, that's all there was.
Right.
There was no professional alternative violinists out there. Right. So it wasn't until like I started, playing in bands in college at Cornell actually, and then I was like, I started sticking out, and people were like, then there's this local band, a professional local band was like, hey man, you want to play with us? And I was like, oh, ding, never ended up
when the phone starts to ring.
Yeah, when the phone, and actually we had landlines back then, but they actually did ring, but I think like, well, once I was put on academic probation because I was just like playing music all the time, and I was not a great engineer student. And so that's when I realized I just loved it so much. I saw that there might be a chance to have a career. But anyways, I went to Berklee College of Music. I studied jazz violin, but I also, being like the careful guy that I am, I got a degree in film scoring, like film composition. So
great.
Just
in your spare time.
Yeah, but that's just like, just the safe part of me, just having something to fall back on.
Yeah, then, always knowing that you can land somewhere.
But it was probably the greatest thing because then basically I did music full time after that, just bouncing between violin playing and film scoring, because just doing one or the other is just like that's tough. So I was just doing both, and that allowed me to keep just doing music.
That's intense. So did you have a clear sense of what your goals were when you graduated school and you were like starting to work in scoring and as a musician? Did you think like, this is the dream, this is when I'll know I've made it?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be a burning jazz violinist. That's what I wanted to be.
Yeah.
and then I went to New York, and then it was like, oh, everybody's burning here, and there's too many fires to kindle, and then that's when I started getting into original, music, which I wanted to do. And so I had a band called Jupiter One. Which actually started in, it became a rock band, but it started as an instrumental, like drum and bass, like jazz fusion band that not that many people came to see except our friends. And then once I started singing, more and more people came out, and like girls would start coming out, and the girls start coming out. When the girls come, that means the guys follow, and then you have a crowd, and before you know it, you can charge tickets.
Hell yeah.
People you don't know will actually pay money to see you.
So You are a parent, and I want to know, I read that when your daughter was really small, you wrote very quiet songs. And also because you were living in New York, like you have a lot of neighbors. And that's like one little example of how being a parent impacts your work. But like now she's a teenager, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And how,
Definitely.
okay, so how is she influencing your work now?
Now, I don't know. I mean, early on, the reason why I'd write quiet songs was because she'd just be sleeping in like the hallway over there, you know? And so it's like, that's like when she's asleep, that's like gold, you know?
Right.
Because otherwise it's just like running around like crazy, can't do anything. So now it's just like, you know, I try and give her like the best life, all the opportunities, you know? She's definitely musically inclined, like she's really talented actually, but she has no intention of being a musician, which is funny. The parents don't want to, I mean, kids don't want to be what their parents are, you know?
Right. Do you pressure her to go into the family business?
No, no. But the one thing I do is like, we make her play violin, you know, 'cause that's like a legacy. We call it, I call it legacy, but it kind of is, you know, it's kind of, you can do it. What are you going to do? Like stop playing and just play games or something? You know what I mean?
What are you going to do with your time?
Yeah. What are you going to do with it? Yeah. You have time to like keep up the violin. She's pretty good, you know, so.
That's great. In interviews, you've said that you are grateful that despite some pressure to assimilate, your parents spoke Japanese with you and maintained a connection to that culture. So how do you walk that tightrope with your own daughter? Are you speaking Japanese with her? Are you intentional about maintaining a connection to Japanese culture with her?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I grew up, assimilation was like kind of like a virtue. You know, like it was regarded as as like how you can blend into white society, you know, the best so that you can succeed, whatever that means, you know. And, but I was always like not afraid of like learning about Japanese. There was some like Japan bashing in the 80s. That was like, it was kind of a little tense, you know. That's when like Japanese cars started flooding America and like it was like so cheap and Detroit was like really upset, you know. But then after that, like, I don't know, it took a while to like, it's kind of good to see that she's like, well, she's into anime now, you know, and like, and there's a lot of Japanese like manga and a lot of Japanese culture is really popular in America. So it's kind of like, it's actually relieving to see that it's not something that's stigmatized or something that you can be, you know, afraid of showing your culture, which is not the case for many other cultures in America, you know.
Right. It's so strange that it's like what happens to be on trend is what is going to be accepted. And
yeah, so, you know, I'm really lucky that I'm in that position, you know, but I remind her of that, you know, that it wasn't like that. It definitely wasn't like that like 75 years ago, you know, when our countries were at war, you know, so it's like
unreal.
Yeah, it's
And speaking of that, so your mom conducted interviews with survivors of the internment camps, correct?
Well, she was, you know, my parents are both immigrants, post-war, you know, so, but she was hired when she was a student at the University of Washington. She was like hired by a researcher, I think, because she spoke Japanese to go like interview them.
Wow.
Yeah, like interview survivors like in the 60s maybe. And she said that they did not, well, first of all, she said what stuck out was that they didn't speak Japanese and she didn't understand like why they didn't want to speak Japanese. And then also that she remembers just like they didn't want to really talk about it because it was just like so humiliating, you know, to just be by your own like home, your government, you know, to just be like locked up, stripped of your wealth, you know.
And was your mom open about that work with you when you were young? Like, did you have this sense that history was connected to you in any way? Or did it feel like this is some textbook crazy thing that happened long ago?
I don't know. I never really talked about too much like injustice or like social justice issues with my mom. You know, she's really positive. She's religious and she's a really wonderful, like loving person, you know, and so we never really talked about like, this is what's wrong with America, you know, so until I start working, I mean, I did an internment camp project in high school and they took me to like the museum, like in DC, where there's an exhibit, but it wasn't until I started working on this movie that we started talking about her experience and also like her Okinawan experience, which she never really, because she's like, she grew up post-war Okinawa, and Okinawa was just a mess, you know, after the Americans invaded. There was this huge war, Battle of Okinawa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll ever, I mean, does it feel raw? Or do you feel like there's something that you would ever be able to write about in her stories? Because I think it would be so interesting to hear about, but I think it can be so challenging to like dig into your own family's history.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still processing it. I would like to make a trip to Okinawa again, because we filmed a little bit for this movie. But I think just like the culture, just, I visit Okinawa a lot, but I didn't realize how much discrimination there was, like from the mainland,
right,
and assimilation, and how like it's really, I don't know, it's kind of like Hawaii of Japan,
right?
It's like it's just an unfortunate, small territory that just got taken over by a larger country. You just can't.
Yeah, and it's wild that your mom would go from that experience to being an American and being an immigrant here, where that issue of assimilating is so front and center as well.
Yeah, I just don't think, like, back in the day, it's just survival. So, you don't, I don't think you have time to be bitter about it. You know what I mean?
Right. And what does your mom think of your work around the internment camps? And we're going to I want to dig in a little bit more your immigrant EP, but what is her reaction when she sees the music and the film that you're making?
Yeah, she's really supportive, so it's kind of
wow, that's great.
And it's great. She's like a beacon for me, like as far as like how like forgiveness works and like healing, and about like just the past is definitely something that has to be, remembered. But as far as like us in the present, you can't let it just debilitate you. You know what I mean? You have to just you have to live your best life. So it's like,
right.
So you can't let all that anger and hatred and all that stuff just take over, So
are there strategies that you have to use when you're like knee deep in this research to get to that place of like, whether it's acceptance or kind of just like, living your best life or joy? Like, how do you get there?
A lot of the work initially, it's like when you learn about like, oh, how different it was back then. I think what I do is I just make sure that I'm like kind of grateful for how not awful our lives are, recently,
right.
But also being like firm about change, and progress, like progressivism, so it's kind of, it's a mixture. I'm generally a positive person, so I don't like cry over Trump for 4 years,
We lived through it.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, it's just something I mean, the one thing is like the more you learn about history, the more grateful I am of just how safer we are, Definitely.
Yeah, just statistically, like we don't live in the violent cultures of the past, even though there's great inequality now.
Yeah, and exactly. And even the great inequality now, it's like, I'm very excited to see like how, like Sola, my daughter's generation, is much more inclusive, and like
right.
More tolerant of like a lot of like or of supporting like marginalized communities and et cetera,
Right.
So it's like I'm like elated that it's like changing in the positive way. So but I guess I'm like that middle-aged person who's like halfway between a really old conservative person and like, or like a liberal conservative, a liberal old person. Liberal old person's still going to be somewhat conservative.
Okay, so I want to talk about your trips to Heart Mountain, which is in Wyoming, where you've been investigating the World War II internment camp. What first prompted you to go out there?
I mean, with the movie initially, one of the
Great.
I have a bunch of friends who are, I met a lot of younger like university like grad students who were doing research out there. So it was kind of like, it was really fun to just discover, like I'm not connected to it, so I'm like an outsider. So I treated it as like a civil rights issue, But then I got to learn the community, and then I started realizing how the assimilation and suppression of culture and like all these things, connected to myself, but I don't know, it's also a really beautiful place, like, to just hang out, just the open West. It's like very exotic for me. So
as you've talked with the community there, and as it's my impression that you've like really gotten to meet a lot of people that were survivors of the internment camp or their families. Do you feel like you have a role in telling their story? Do you feel like you have a specific job to play in that community?
Yeah, a lot of times, like a lot of as far as like outreach and just making the story known, I feel like I definitely need to do this, in that like a lot of people don't know about it, and it's to not know about it is really is like a really dangerous situation to be. So it's like something I feel like, and I need to do, but also like I owe it to them for, for opening up to me and like allowing me to feel part of their community, so, yeah, it's definitely a story that I want to tell, and then also connect it to, every other, like all the other marginalized stories here, as we, as a culture, like combat like white supremacy, and understand like how it's changing, or being questioned.
Yeah, I think it's a really timely topic. I mean, it's almost like these loops of history keep coming back of like, who are we going to choose to exclude and scapegoat now?
Yeah.
As a way of never getting to the bottom of like real inequality and real problems.
Like everything, like even like having empathy and like and inclusion and like social justice, these are all like very recent. I feel like they're very recent constructs, from the 60s, 70s, post-war, post-Holocaust things, and if you look back before then, the world was just like a rat race of just tribalism and like, I'm going to kill you before you kill me kind of situation, or I'm going to conquer you. I'm going to conquer you before, you take advantage of me. And it was like, that was the norm, so it's like an ethnic cleansing was the norm. And so like as modern people, we are now really blessed to have this like acknowledgement, this understanding that that's wrong and that we are better than like our previous generations. So I think that's why like history is like extremely important to know. And that's kind of what I keep in mind all the time.
That makes me think of the song on the Immigrant EP, Town of Prey. What's the first line? Is it "This Will All Be Mine"? Yeah,
so he's Town of Prey, yeah. So that's a good tie-in. So the so the immigrant, that whole idea is like, I was just thinking about like frontier, like pioneering, and it's like, you think it's just such a violent time. You have like prospectors coming out from just searching for gold or riches or just a better life, and then you have like the like Native Americans who are not happy that you're coming in, and
just charging in.
Yeah, just charging in and like taking over, and it's just like it's fascinating me like so much, and that these like, and I always ask the question to myself, like as I was traveling, because I did a couple road trips. Like last year, I did a big road trip, to across the country with the RV, with Solo. And I kept asking myself, was it possible for like, the Native Americans and the pioneers to just get along and peacefully? And I don't think I have an answer for that. It was just
like, is there another universe in which it didn't have to end this way?
Yeah, like two proud races of. And when I say Native Americans, like races, I'm talking, there's still tribalism within them at the time, but like, and they would find alliances within, different tribes to use to their advantage, but like, I don't know. It's just like, I don't know that it was possible. It was just so violent and like territorial and tribal, even like the white tribe. I mean, like the early Americans were like a tribe, combating, I might get in trouble for that, but it's like, what I'm saying is that the imagination, I kind of put into it, like when you go out into the open, you kind of like, if you live in a city, you really don't see that history that came before you, but if you go out into the prairie, you can see this is probably what it looked like 150 years ago, and it's so hard to like thrive here, like in Montana and like Wyoming. It's just so cold in the winter, and it's like there's barely any resources, so it's like I got imagining a lot.
Let's talk about the EP, which
yes.
I've listened to now a million times.
Oh, thanks.
I'm curious about how you approach arrangements and production. With this EP, did you know what you wanted it to sound like, or did you have song ideas and then you built out layers from there?
Well, normally what I do is I demo everything. So like I put it together, like I just play everything like whatever.
On guitar
And just whatever I think it needs, And then when I feel good about it, and then I have enough songs, then I'll call up my musicians and be like,
okay,
yo, but then, so this time around I had like 4 good songs that I felt good about. And then like a couple, and then I added a couple covers, and that's the EP. So
I think the covers that you chose were really interesting. were you thinking thematically about that immigrant experience and like this sort of like empathy thread with those two covers? It was Regina Spektor and Dolly Parton, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that, and I love those songs. Also, I just wanted just feature like female songwriters, I think, that are underrated.
Talk about it.
You know what I mean? It's like, because I looked at like, I was like, oh, I need a couple covers. I was looking around like Rolling Stone top 100 songwriters or whatever list, and it's just mostly dudes and like Dolly Parton maybe and like Madonna or something.
Right.
And it's just like, oh,
it's a damn shame is what we call it.
Yeah, and it's just it's another man's world, you know, so that needs to be like acknowledged. And so I thought I won't do a Bob Dylan cover ever in my life, you know what I mean, or record one at least. There's no need.
It's been done. I think he can live without your support.
Yeah. No, I love Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
but you know, I won't make a point of it, you know. So I feel like that's the kind of thing that people need to do just to be inclusive, I guess, to change the dynamic.
So many people are talking about it right now, and it's good to just be about it. You don't have to like proclaim your allegiance to feminism. Just put in the work.
Yeah, just
I support that.
Yeah, just hire a person of color. You know, what's the big deal?
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the story of your violin, which is named Tsunami?
Oh, Violin Tsunami, yeah. So my friend of mine, Mr. Yuba, he's Brazilian Japanese, and he made this. He's been like Luthering, like kind of like as a hobby, and then, well, it's first a hobby, and then he started getting really good, and he made this amazing violin. And it's a Stradivarius Guarneri like hybrid.
Wow.
And and the moment I played it, I was just like, wow, this is a really great violin. And so,
is it like that Harry Potter moment when your wand chooses you?
I think it chose me. Well, he definitely brought it to me, but I definitely. And so I and my mom, my mom's like, I'll buy it for you. So thanks, Mom. She bought it for me. And then
shouts to Mom.
I know, violin stuff. But he had actually he's a Buddhist. He's a Buddhist priest. He doesn't. He has a training, and so he like
monk maybe.
Monk, yeah, but I don't know if he's active. You know, do you have to be active?
Okay.
So, anyways, he's like but when he was creating the violin, it was during the Fukushima, the nuclear disaster, and the Sendai tsunami disaster, and basically he had put a lot of his thoughts into that tragedy, as like while he was making the violin. And so he named it Tsunami. So on the inside it says Tsunami violin.
Are you spiritual at all? Like, do you feel like that emotion and intention affects your playing? Like, do you feel like you have a relationship with the instrument?
I don't know that I feel the sorrow of everybody in this violin, but I definitely feel the significance of it, you know, and I think that, you know, like you can put your emotion into something, an inanimate object or something, and that's a very Japanese thing, is that that everything has a spirit. I could see, I get a good feeling on it. It's also a really nice violin. So,
well, I have read that you said something that I thought was really interesting, even though I, am not as knowledgeable on the context, that as an American, you don't really dive too deep into the Shinto concept of, every object having a soul. But I'm wondering, do you think about the soul at all? Like the human soul? Do you have a concept of spirituality?
Yeah. I mean, I think, like, do I believe in God?
I mean,
is that what you're asking me?
God, capital G, can be so boring. I'm more curious of like, do you feel like connected to spirit beyond like what we can see?
Yeah, I think so. I don't like firmly believe in, I don't know. I mean, I hope that there's like a purpose to our existence, because it's like our world is just completely, could just be chaotic and chaos and bunch of atoms floating in space, but somehow we're actually here talking to each other, connecting across hundreds or thousands of miles, and just like not even and like empathizing with people we don't even know, and we have this like incredible experience as human beings, that it's just like, I would hope that there's a meaning to this, and that there's something after, and I think that's that belief, and that having that faith is probably like the belief in God. And then I think that like, and even like beyond the physical, I think, there's probably, I don't know, I think there's something out there, So I feel like everything is connected in a way. Sometimes we feel it, sometimes we don't, but when you do.
Yeah, I like to think that like I may not know like what God is, capital G, but I'm humble enough to realize that I don't know everything and there could be something out there.
And we'll never ever know. And if somebody claims to know, they're just full of shit. So it's like, you know what I mean? That's what I think, but we find like,
yeah.
But then, when you're in nature, that's when I feel like you feel really connected. When you see the magnificence of just, and your humble existence in this beautiful place, that's when I'm like, oh, like constantly, like there's a hill over by where I just moved to Montana, but there's like a hill.
Oh, great.
And I just go see the sunset like every day, and it's like different every single day. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. I have a question about an interview that you gave to KEXP, where I thought you made a really interesting point where you said, I think people are more receptive now. And when I say people, I mean white people are receptive to difficult histories. So like I sat with that for a minute and I wondered, to what degree do you feel a responsibility or like maybe even a burden or, a request to educate white people? And I mean, you are a very well-known and somewhat politically outspoken Asian American artist. Do you find that white audiences kind of turn to you for your take on things? Like, do you feel like you're being asked to educate people?
Definitely recently, for sure. I think I'm always like, I'm very non-confrontational. At least I just like to get along. So I was never very like politically active until recently, probably because honestly, I saw a tipping point where it was actually okay to feel like, for example, like Black Lives Matter, the first time it came around in Ferguson, it was kind of fringe, corporations weren't on board. It was kind of like a liberal thing, right? But then like now, like 4 years later, I don't know, 8 years later, it's basically like companies are now like, acknowledging,
beating us over the head with it.
Yeah, but it's not like the companies are progressive. They're following the culture of society.
Oh,
you know what I mean? The money. And so it's like, I think that American...
When you see like a Pepsi commercial for Black Lives Matter, it's no longer fringe.
Yeah, that at least 51% of Coca-Cola drinkers are actually believe in like progressive politics to some extent, or like at least acknowledging police brutality, And I think that's like, I'm just more like, I feel more comfortable, to be like, to say that. And if I'm going to be like on the edge, I want to be on the, on the way I feel. And I think it's, I'm definitely careful about like being like too liberal on my like social media stuff. I'm very liberal, but like, especially social media, because people come to me to stay positive and like they want to hear like fun things, and I don't want to bum people out like all the time.
Right.
And so I'm very selective.
That's tough. I'm sure you have to balance like giving people what they expect from you.
Yeah.
Which is, many wonderful things versus like what may feel really relevant and pressing to you at the moment.
Yeah. So usually I like to put my own context on it and like how I feel about it, and then like occasionally there'll be some trolls and stuff, but it's never like, I'm never like
the worst.
Trying to get a reaction out of people and just like, But it's I don't know. I'm also older, so now I feel like as I've matured into my 40s, I feel like I don't want to be just a childish musician anymore. I want to. I'm a member of society now. So
right. No, I just think it's so interesting because often like you're not strictly a folk artist, of course, but we are on basic folk. So sometimes when I think about these folk audiences, they are not entirely, but sort of predominantly white. And, if your audience is of the dominant culture and then they see you as this sort of messenger of, education and fun and politics, like you end up being so many things to so many people. And I wonder how that responsibility affects you.
Well, I think it's like, I believe in like, not one single person will ever change anything. It's really a collective thing. If you hear about it here, you hear about it here, hear about it on the news, and maybe your favorite violin guy, Kishi Bashi, mentions it over here, then maybe that'll put together, help you like kind of like warm up to the idea, And that's like, that's my hope.
That's such an interesting way of looking at it. I think so many people, like political scientists, are trying to dial in influence and figure out like what changes people's minds. Why do people vote the way they do, shop the way they do, etc. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at it, that it's not any one single thing.
Yeah, and that's tied into like people ask me about like promotion, like they like my career. They're like, when did you make it? You know, what was the one big thing? And I've had a lot of big things, but it's like I never bet all my chips on like one thing. You know what I mean? You could play like, you get like a good write up in NPR, or like you play Letterman, or like I don't know, you do something like really cool. A bunch of these things will add up to a sustained career, you know? And so like some people, well, for me, like success is basically a lot of people showing up at my shows, you know? So that's the only gauge I have.
That's the success we're getting to. That's
like,
making it.
Like sold out tours. Like that's, to me, that makes me feel good. But as far as like white audiences, there's like there's a statistic that's kind of like grounds me into like my worldview, in that like American, a few years ago, over 50% of like school age children are people of color. And it's like, when I learned that, I was like, oh, no wonder there's like a backlash. Like, no wonder people feeling like they're replaced, you know, and no wonder. And it's like, that's when I started feeling encouraged, you know, as a person of color, or as a minority, but also like, I try and encourage like, you know, white people, that it's not something to be fearful of, you know.
Right.
It's like, it's actually a beautiful thing. And it's like, we're finally, you know, making a lot of other people more happy in this country, you know, and inclusive. And then like, it's just about like sharing wealth. You know, we've a lot, you know, and I'm a privileged person. Asian people have done pretty well for themselves recently, you know, financially at least. And then like, you can, you know, you just have to give up some wealth to make room for others, you know. And so it's like, to give happiness to
others. It is that simple. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's like, I'm very encouraged, you know, but a lot of it is about like changing our feeling about, you know, or even like, you know, folk music. When you say Americana, like, what does that mean? Yeah. It's
a trap.
But I mean, it's American. It's a type of music, but it's definitely not. Black people don't play Americana. You know what I mean? It's like a white. Right? It's a white folk thing, right? Like, what does that even mean? It's like, maybe we should. I don't know. Are you guys questioning? Is that something that's being talked about?
I think it is being talked about, and it is. I feel. I will do a whole other podcast about my career and what it is to be Black in Americana, or Black Americana, or whatever the title is. But is
there a thing called Black Americana? Is that a genre?
I don't think so. But it's like an identity thing. I think this is so interesting, because if you're not white and you're playing folk or Americana, people are going to call you
Black Americana.
Black Americana. But it's like, well, you can't, that's not a genre. There's no sound of, there's no Asian American folk. There's just Asian American people playing folk, right?
So what am I, like, Asian Americana?
Yeah. You know what? We might be next to each other on the you know, library shelf.
Asian Americana. Nice. East Asian Americana. Nice.
East Asian Americana and Black Americana.
Yeah, I mean,
there's room for all of us.
And I think like a lot of, so like with the creation of the Emigrant EP, you know, and my like going into like fiddle styles, I think that's something where I felt more confident being like, you know what, I don't need to be from Kentucky or white or whatever to play fiddle music, you know, because I love it.
No.
You know, and it's like.
And you have just as much of a claim on it as anyone, because you're an American, you're a student of this music, you are like an active participant in the culture. But do you get like looks of surprise? I mean, I'm sure you don't now as someone that's been doing this, but like, did you ever get looks of surprise for like playing fiddle style as someone that doesn't look like, you know, the stereotype?
Well, I definitely wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't have felt confident enough to put it on an album until recently, you know. But same with like the banjo player Tall Tall Trees. He's from Long Island, you know, and he says he has like imposter syndrome, where he's just like, I don't feel like I deserve to claim it. But, you know, I think people claiming their music as their own is just exclusionary, you know. I think they should just chill out and just let people do what they want, you know, as far as art is concerned.
Where do you think you got, like, what do you think was the shift where you like felt that confidence to put out this EP in this style?
I mean, it's basically like this whole just understanding my identity, you know, which is this whole movie that I'm working on. And it's like it's about Japanese American identity. Like, where is it? Where is our place, you know, in society? And it's like, it's in a bunch of different places, but it's never been at the top. That's for sure. you know? And so it's like, as I questioned this, I looked into music, you know, because I like jazz and, you know, I like rap and stuff, but it's like, I never felt like I would release a rap album or even jazz.
Yet?
No, probably not. But even like jazz, like a lot of, you know, a lot of black people like in New York, you know, they have like an attitude about like, this is my music. And it's like, yeah, it is. Sure. And I felt that. And how do I feel about it? And I questioned myself a lot, you know, I don't know. But they're also like, musicians are also generally inclusive. You know, they kind of colorblind and most of the time.
I think most musicians I know, I feel like you can tell if someone's about it or not.
Yeah.
Like you can tell when someone is trying to dip into a culture that they know nothing about for clout versus someone who genuinely is paying tribute to the tradition.
Or if you can communicate in that language, like jazz, you know, instantly you're talking, you're conversing.
No one cares what you look like.
Yeah. So, yeah, you're right. I think it's like critics and stuff. Music critics are. They're kind of very. They have their own club, you know.
We'll let them figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a lightning round for you if you're game.
Yeah.
As before I let you go, the rules are you can skip a question, of course.
Okay.
But you are under oath.
Okay.
It will be timed.
Yep.
And you can't ask for any clarification. Just go from the gut.
Okay. What's the prize? The
prize is the admiration of the basic folk audience and my friendship.
Great. Okay. Sure. Sounds great. That's
great.
That's so valuable. That's very valuable. Yeah.
Okay, great. What is your favorite flower?
Daffodil.
What was the first song you learned on guitar?
Metallica. Ride Lightning.
Oh, nice. What was the last movie you loved?
Back to the Future.
What is your go-to pre-show drink?
Oh,
Back to the Future too.
Just kidding. No, just kidding. My favorite drink before gin and tonic.
Gin and tonic, a classic.
Yep.
What was your most embarrassing quarantine activity?
Working out at home and then somebody see me through the window.
No. Who is your favorite band to see in concert?
I like seeing Old Montreal. They're fun.
Very good. What is the best Halloween costume you've ever done?
I was a donkey. I was a smart ass. So it was like a donkey with like nerd glasses.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
We love a pun.
I love puns.
What is one product you can't live without?
Pillow. Is that a product?
Yeah, that's a product.
Okay.
It is made. And finally, who is your celebrity crush?
Oh, like Alice. What's her name? I love her so much. From Friends. What's her name?
Wait, from Friends?
I don't know.
Alice. There's no Alice in Friends.
She's
like a character or an actor?
Oh, I was going to say Jennifer Aniston. Sure, let's just say that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's America's crush.
Yeah, she's mom. Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, you have been a wonderful guest.
God, that was like so bad. Okay.
No, you crushed it. You've won the lightning round. Thank you so much for talking with me. Everyone, please go listen to the Emigrant EP. It is illuminating. Kishi Bashi, you've been the best. I'm Lizzie No. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's fun.
This week's episode of Basic Folk was produced by John Nungesser. Alex Stanton of the band Townspeople composes our music. Thanks again to Lizzie No for hosting on Basic Folk today. You can find Lizzie on the internet. You can get her music wherever you find your music. Bandcamp is a great place to go find it. And her tour dates, etc., are all at her social media, which I will link in the show notes. Basic Folk is on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. I am Cindy Howes. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this episode with a friend if you enjoyed it. And you can find all of the episodes of Basic Folk, including Lizzie's first episode where she interviewed the great Amethyst Kia, at basicfolk.com or wherever you get podcasts. And we'll talk to you next time. Okay, bye.